You learned to read the room before you learned to read a book. Not because someone taught you, but because it was safer to know what was coming than to be caught off guard. You watched the way your mother held her coffee cup in the morning to know what kind of day it would be. You watched the silence between your parents at dinner the way other kids watched cartoons, looking for information. You got very good at it. Not gifted, not special, just trained by necessity to notice what other people broadcast without saying. And somewhere in that process, you stopped being a child in the room and started being a censor. Your job, the one nobody gave you officially, but everyone counted on, was to manage the emotional temperature. When your father came home tense, you went quiet. When your mother cried in the kitchen, you appeared, somehow, with the right words. When your parents fought, you became calm, because someone had to. You learned that your own feelings were a scheduling conflict. There was never a good time for them. Someone was always already struggling, and you couldn't add to it. So you held things. You stored things. You got very, very good at appearing fine, not performing fine, actually constructing a version of fine that held up under pressure. And adults called you mature. They called you old for your age. They said you were so easy. What they meant was, you made yourself manageable so that they didn't have to manage themselves. That is not maturity. That is adaptation under emotional pressure. The therapist child doesn't get to have a meltdown when they're overwhelmed. The therapist child has already identified who in the room needs them more. You might have been 10 years old, sitting with a parent who was crying about something you didn't fully understand. And instead of being confused or scared, you went into the mode you had practiced. You asked the right questions. You said the calming thing. You stayed present, steady, useful. And afterward, you felt something complicated. Not exactly proud, not exactly burdened. Something that didn't have a name, because nobody ever told you it was allowed to have one. Here's what that behavior was doing underneath. It was buying safety. In families where an adult's emotional state determines the quality of the environment, children learn to manage those adults to stabilize the space. Empathy becomes a tool before it ever becomes a feeling. You didn't comfort your parent because you felt their pain and responded to it. You comforted your parent because an uncomfortable parent meant an unsafe room. That is a significant difference. And most therapist children never learn to separate them. So they grow up and they keep doing it. With friends, with partners, with coworkers. You are the one people call when something is wrong. You always answer. Not because you love crisis, but because staying present in someone else's pain is the only emotional role you were ever fully trained for. Your own pain, meanwhile, sits in a different drawer. One you don't open in public. You're articulate about other people's feelings, remarkably so. But ask you what you need, and something shifts. A small hesitation, a reroute. You say something general, or you say you're fine. Or you turn the question back around. You've spent so much time developing a map of other people's interiors that your own interior became less visited. Not unknown, just deprioritized for so long that going there now feels unfamiliar. The conversations you remember most vividly from childhood are not the ones where you were comforted. They're the ones where you helped someone, where your presence solved something, where someone looked at you afterward with relief and you felt, briefly, that you were valuable in the room. That moment of relief in their face, that became the thing you pursued. Not love exactly, usefulness. The feeling of being the person who made things better. Because love felt conditional in ways you couldn't control, but usefulness had a formula. Be available, be calm, be perceptive. Listen longer than is comfortable. Don't add to the problem. And the formula worked. People kept coming to you. You kept feeling temporarily valued. You didn't realize until much later that this was a transaction, and that you were always the one paying. You didn't notice the pattern because the pattern felt like who you were. Not a strategy, a self. The therapist child grows into an adult who genuinely does not know how to be in a relationship without becoming the emotional custodian. It's not conscious. It happens before the thought arrives. A friend says they're struggling and you're already 3 steps ahead, holding the space, tracking their tone, adjusting your responses. You never decided to be the helper, you just became it, and now that role fits so well that removing it feels like removing something structural. Like it would change the shape of you. And maybe it has. Maybe you've been the emotional anchor for so long that you genuinely don't know what you'd be without it. That's not a small thing to sit with, but it's worth sitting with. Because here's what the role quietly costs, and it costs it slowly, so you don't notice until the bill is large. You get tired in ways you can't easily explain, not sleepy, not burned out in the way people talk about at work. A specific kind of tired that comes from being present for everyone except yourself, consistently, for years. You cancel plans because you feel drained, but you don't know what drained you because you weren't doing anything for yourself anyway. You were just available, just listening, just holding, and that holding has weight. The other cost is loneliness, a very particular kind. You are surrounded by people who need you, who come to you, who trust you with the real things, and still, somehow, you feel like nobody actually sees you. Because they don't. They see the function. They see the calm, steady, available person. They don't see that you went home and sat with your own heaviness and had nobody to call. Or that you called someone and the conversation slowly migrated the way it always does, back to them. You've been in friendships for years where the listening ratio is so skewed that you could calculate it. But you stay. Because leaving feels like abandonment. Because cutting off someone who needs you feels like cruelty. That guilt is old. It was installed early. It kept you in the role when leaving would have been reasonable. There's also this. Therapist children often struggle to trust people who seem emotionally stable. If someone doesn't seem to need you, you don't know what your place is. The relationship doesn't have a shape you recognize. So you either manufacture distance or wait for a problem to appear so you can finally be useful. This is not something most people would say out loud, but it's real, and you probably recognized it just now. The misconception most therapist children carry is that they are simply caring people with strong empathy. And maybe that's partly true. But empathy that was learned as a survival skill is different from empathy that developed freely. One is a gift. The other is armor. And armor is heavier than it looks, especially after decades. The people who love you would not describe you as someone who struggles. They'd call you the strong one, the one who has it together, the one who knows what to say. And you've never corrected them because that description protects you from something. If they know you struggle, they might need you differently, or they might not know what to do with you. And you cannot bear the thought of being the person in the room who requires managing. That is the core of it. That is what all of this has been protecting. You made yourself unburdensome so completely that you became genuinely unable to be burdened, not as a strength, as a wall. And on the other side of that wall are needs and feelings and moments of real confusion that you have been quietly routing away from everyone, including yourself. The person who spent their childhood making sure everyone else was okay never learned what okay actually feels like for them. Not performed okay. Not functional okay. The quiet, uneventful, nobody needs me right now kind of okay. That kind of stillness might still feel dangerous. Like something is wrong because nothing is wrong. Like you should be doing something, helping something, fixing something. That restlessness is a residue. It's not a character trait. It's a response pattern that outlived the environment that created it. If any of this is landing close to something real, it's worth saying clearly, this video is reflection, not a replacement for actual support from a professional who can work with you specifically. Because the thing about growing up as the family's emotional caretaker is that the solution isn't just awareness. Awareness is where it starts, but unlearning a role this deep takes more than a video, and more than insight alone. What it takes at minimum is practice. Practice letting someone else hold something for once. Practice saying something true about your own state without immediately adding, "but I'm fine." Practice being in a conversation where you are not the most useful person in the room. Practice sitting in the stillness without converting it into productivity or someone else's emergency. None of that is easy when the original training ran this deep. But the fact that you recognized yourself somewhere in the coffee cup observation, in the emotional scheduling, in the loneliness of being needed but not seen, that recognition is not nothing. It means the part of you that knows something is off has been waiting for language. You spent years giving other people the words for what they felt. Maybe it's time someone returned the favor.